Hello everyone and welcome to a wonderful game that was just played in the Chessable Masters preliminaries. It's Liren versus Magnus Carlsen, and it's one of those games that did not live up to its fullest potential because of the format it was played in. But then we always said that if the format was different, that position would never have been reached. It's a give and take situation, but you guys will have a great opportunity here to improve on this game and make it even better, as some of the secrets were not revealed during the game. So let's dive straight into it. Ding has the white pieces and he opens with c4. He goes for the English opening. We have g6 by Magnus, d4, knight to f6, knight to f3, and bishop to g7. We transpose into the King's Indian defense. We have e3, castles by Magnus, bishop to e2, and b6. Now preparing to fianchetto the light square bishop as well. We have castles, bishop to b7, and now queen to c2. Knight to c3 and queen to c2 are both very popular here. We have e6 by Magnus, and the Ding goes for the immediate b4, not messing around obviously. And Magnus seems to know this position very well, as he played a5 and tried to surprise Ding right out of the opening, because it's only move 7, but Ding already played this position. It was in March this year. You know, Ding had to play like 100 games to qualify for the candidates tournament, and he had this position against Shu where d6 was played, and this is in fact the strongest move recommended by the engine, but Ding was able to win this game. However, Magnus knows this, obviously. He plays a5 and he says, "I've prepared for you well, my young apprentice." So a5, it is as of move 8 that we have a completely new game. b5, Ding closes the queen side, and now d6. We have knight to c3 and knight b to d7. We have a bishop to a3 and now rook to e8. You don't want a position to open up while your rook is still on f8, so rook to e8, rook a to d1, and now queen to e7. Developing the queen, connecting the rooks. Looks a bit odd placing the queen to such a square that the bishop has access to, but Magnus is saying there's no way this position opens up anytime soon. And now comes rook f to e1. Now, the tricky move was not rook f to e1. The tricky move is actually knight to e5. We have to take advantage of the queen being on e7, as for the moment it is a silly square for the queen, and our real goal is to put a knight on c6. And then, black will, Magnus will even either have to allow the knight to remain on c6, or we're just gonna put it on c6, black will capture, and then Ding will have a beautiful bishop put on this diagonal. So that's one way to do it. But okay, it's a rapid game. Rook f to e1, and now Magnus strikes in the center with e5. And okay, d captures on e5. We have knight captures on e5, so no danger here. Knight to d5 now, attacking the queen here. Bishop captures on d5, c captures, and now knight captures on f3. Bishop captures, and now queen back to d8. So what Ding got out of this position is that now Magnus has a backward c7 pawn, and that's going to be a long-term weakness. Ding has full control over the c6 square, and if Magnus can, or rather if Ding can pile up on that pawn, it's gonna be great. But usually one weakness is not enough to win the game. You have to create more weaknesses. So Ding starts with h4. He wants to open up the position here, play g3, put the king on g2, and then put his rooks on the h file. That will soon open up. So this will be the second weakness. So knight to d7 by Magnus. He wants to put the knight on c5, so he closes up the position. That way Ding will not be able to take advantage of the weak c7 pawn. h5, we have knight to c5, and now g3. Well, like we said, preparing king to g2 and rook to h1. Queen to f6. Of course, Magnus does not want to allow any sort of an attack. He wants to trade queens right away. King to g2, and now queen to c3. And here, Ding does trade. We have queen captures, bishop captures, and now rook to h1. The rook now occupies the soon-to-be semi-open h file. King to g7 and rook to c1 now, chasing the bishop back with bishop to e5, and now not opening up with captures on g6, but rather h6. Now we are no longer playing an attacking game. Now we are in the end game, and we need as many positional trumps as possible. So now we have this going for us, so the knight can never move from that square, and we also kind of boxed in the black king a little bit here. So king to f8, and now rook to c4, grabbing hold of the entire fourth rank. And now what can Magnus do? We have rook to e7, bishop to c1. Now we have rook 8 to e8, and now pawn to e4. And here Magnus played bishop to f6. He attacks the e4 pawn 3 times now, but the Ding just says you've got nothing here, bishop to e3, and there really is no way for Magnus to keep improving his position. Okay, the pawn can be captured, but then the c7 pawn will hang. For example, if we just trade everything, captures, captures, and captures, rook captures on c7, then the bishop gobbles up all of the pawns on the queen side, and then you just lose the game. So Magnus says, all right, I admit it, I've got nothing here, I'm just gonna repeat moves with my king. So king to g8, rook to d1 by Ding, and now king to f8. We have king to h3, king to g8, Magnus continues repeating, and bishop to g2. Now the problem, and pretty much the only problem for Ding in this position, is that he is very much low on time. He has some 2 minutes on the clock, whereas Magnus is up to his full 15 minutes on the clock. He really prepared well for Ding, as like I said, Ding did play this game 2 months ago, so Magnus knows all the ins and outs of the position. So king f8, bishop to f3. Magnus just repeats. He's satisfied with the draw here. Of course, there's no way for him to push. So either Ding will push and maybe over push, or he will settle for a draw. So king to g2. We have king to f8. Now comes king to f1 and king to g8. Bishop back to g2. King f8 by Magnus. f3 now. Now we strengthen this pawn, and now we can activate our light square bishop as well. So this is one last attempt for Ding. King to g8. Bishop h3. We have king to f8. King to g2. We have king to g8, king to f2, now comes king to f8, and the bishop to f1. We have king to g8 and the bishop to d3. So now Ding is offering a trade of knight for bishop, but of course Magnus is not moving this knight away from c5. The c7 square will become too weak. So bishop to h8, and now bishop to c2. And now with all of this king-bishop maneuvering, Ding got very nice control over this diagonal, and this could come in very handy, as you'll see, because here Magnus needs to just repeat moves. He needs to play king to f8, but somehow, for some reason, this maneuvering by Ding got Magnus to open up the position. Magnus played f5, and this is now a completely winning position for Ding, but there is simply not enough time on the clock to figure this one out. However, you are, I hope, very, very comfortable in your homes watching this, maybe on your smartphone or on your computer or laptop. So feel free to pause the video and try to spot what Magnus missed here while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on solving this one, and I really hope you took your time with this one, because it's just beautiful. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is bishop to g5. But the first move of this tricky variation is not the difficult one to spot, it's the second one that's difficult. So after rook to e5, and this was played in the game, now Ding repeated bishop to f4. But this is not the move that we were looking for. The true move that you had to find after bishop g5 and rook to e5 is e captures on f5, but this seems like too much to give black, because now rook to e2, and it seems like white might be in trouble. But this is exactly the line that we have to explore, because after rook to e2 check, king to f1 and rook to h2, now we want to play rook to e2, and it doesn't seem like the white king will be able to avoid all of the checks. However, there is the very forcing f captures on g6. Now rook to e2, g captures on h7 with check, king to f7, now rook to f4 with check, king to e8, and now the beautiful bishop g6 check, king to d7, and now bishop to f5 with check, king to e8, and it seems like white has nothing better other than repeating moves here and claim a draw, but there is a bishop to h3, and this is the move that allows white to win the game. And this is, of course, the move that Ding did not have enough time to calculate, because who would see all of this? But now you've taken away the g2 square from the black rooks, and there is no perpetual here. Of course, if the bishop is captured, we're going to gobble up the rook, and once one check is given, there are no more checks, and that's it. Now white will just easily win the game. So what you you would do after e captures on f5 is there's nothing better than g captures on f5. And now we have this very nice rook to d2. Now we're saying, okay, now there's no counterplay. And if you look at the position, there's really no good move for black here. Black is completely tied down. For example, rook to f8, we want to add more protection to the f-pawn. We're going to play bishop back to e3, prepare the march over g-pawn, and after something like rook back to e7, we're going to play, of course, pawn to g4. Now we're just threatening to win a pawn here, so there are two options. One is to play bishop to f6, but this will not work. Because after g5, the tactic that black would have in mind, rook captures on e3, doesn't really work. King captures, bishop captures on g5 with check, hoping to win back the material, but now just f4. And after bishop captures on h6, this is very much winning for white. You have two rooks and a bishop against a rook, bishop, and knight. And okay, black is up 2 pawns, but the two rooks will more than compensate for that. So after g4, f captures on g4 seems to be your only option, but now we have rook captures with check, king to f7, and now bishop to g5. And this is with absolute best defense from black what we would get, where absolutely everything loses. If we play bishop to f6, then we just capture, and after king captures, rook to f4 check. Notice that the g7 square is taken by the pawn, so the king has to move. Once the king moves, we just pick up the free rook on f8. And if you don't go bishop to f6, you can play something like, okay, your rook is attacked, you can move the rook back. We just play bishop captures on h7, and now there is absolutely no square left for the black king. This is covered by the pawn, this is covered by the bishop, this is covered by the bishop, by the bishop, by the pawn, by the bishop, and once rook to f4 check lands, that is just it. So this is the position that we could have had if this was, if this was a longer time control. But then again, if it was longer time control, then we would never get this position in the first place. So that's the kind of the beauty and the horror of chess in modern times. So here, instead of e captures on f5, that completely shatters black's position. Ding played bishop to f4, rook 5 to e7, bishop g5, and here after a few repetitions, the players agree to a draw, or rather, it's a draw by threefold repetition. So really, I would say a ruined Brilliancy, not great, but Magnus did prepare very well, and he is Magnus Carlsen. Of course, Ding doesn't think that Magnus would miss something like this, and if he had like a minute more on the clock, or he had 2 minutes on the clock, so if he had any inclination that there was something, he would start the digging, and 2 minutes for Ding, it's like a week for the rest of us. So I think he would crack it. It's just that he didn't his spidey sense wasn't tingling, so so that's the problem, I think, with this game. But yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and that you were able to solve this e captures on f5 mystery. Truly a wonderful one. And then finding that bishop all the way back to h3, that's just a beauty. So really hope you enjoyed that. I would like to thank David Kimura, Adam Simmons, Robert Kiefer, Mark Mara, and Nagarjuna Ponugoti for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world, such as games like these. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.